Today we have a very interesting show for you. We are welcoming Seamus Bruner. You can follow him at Seamus Bruner, BRUNER.com. Also at Seamus Bruner on Twitter and Instagram. His book is Controligarchs, Exposing the Billionaire Class and Their Secret Deals. We're going to talk about globalism. There is that Controligarch cover. He has been the director of research, Seamus has, at the Government Accountability Institute, and author of other best-selling books, Compromised and Fallout. We've got a lot to get into today. We have, of course, with us Dr. Kelly Victory. So let's get right to it after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I think everyone knows the next medical crisis could be just around the corner, whether it comes in the form of another pandemic or something much more routine like a tick bite. You and your family need to be prepared. That's where the wellness company comes in. You know the wellness company. We have their physicians on, like Dr. McCullough, frequently. The wellness company and their doctors are medical professionals you can trust. And their new medical emergency kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy.
It's a safety net. It's an insurance policy
absolutely.
That you hope you're not going to
100%.
need, but if you need it, you sure as heck are going to wish you had it if you need it.
Be ready for anything. This medical emergency kit contains an assortment of life-saving medications, including ivermectin, Z-Pak. The medical emergency kit provides a guidebook to aid in the safe use of all these life-saving medications. From anthrax to tick bites to COVID-19, the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit is exactly what you need to have on hand to be prepared. Rest assured, knowing that you have emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and antiparasitics on hand to help you and your family stay safe from whatever life throws at you next. Go to drdrew.com/TWC. That is DRDREW.com/TWC to get 10% off today. Just click on that link. So as I said, you can follow Seamus at SeamusBruner.com. Also, Seamus Bruner on Twitter, SeamusBruner. And the book, let's throw that up there one more time. It is Controligarchs. And I don't know if you all have noticed what I've noticed, but there seems to be a certain class of, certainly of politicians these days, that seems to get off, for lack of a better way of describing it, on controlling other people's lives. I don't understand that impulse. I certainly don't understand people's willingness or desire to comply with that. That is the most anathema impulse in my body. But it seems like COVID taught us that a lot of people do seem to like that that controlling kind of influence in their life. So please welcome Seamus Bruner.
Dr. Drew, it's such a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure to have you. I'm sorry we had a little technical problem getting going here. You hear me okay? Everything sounds good? Looks good?
Everything sounds great.
All right, great. So just first, let's start with the book. What would we learn reading the book? What led to your desire to tell this story? What did you notice? How did you get to this place where you felt, I got to write a book about this?
Well, at the Government Accountability Institute, we follow the money. That is our motto around here. And we usually are following it to the politicians, and we exposed insider trading in Congress. We've exposed the Clintons and the Bushes and the Bidens by following the money. But I thought to myself, especially through the pandemic, why not follow it all the way to the top? A lot of times it feels like our politicians are sort of just puppets exerting the will of a more powerful group. And sure enough, the pandemic proved that. I mean, with Bill Gates, who's not a doctor at all, somehow assuming the role of global health expert and then trying out these, middle of the pandemic mandates, it was too much. And so you hear it all the time. The pandemic is over. COVID's over. Why are we talking about COVID? The reason I did this book is because COVID was just a blueprint for the future. And it was an opportunity, in the words of people like Klaus Schwab and other global elites, Prince Andrew or King Andrew, it was an opportunity. And sure enough, we followed the money. We saw that, people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg almost doubled his net worth. He's now worth close to $120 billion. And there's nothing wrong with making money, but when you're doing it by locking people in their homes and forcing them into tech addiction, that's a big problem. And so that I thought following the money would be an important way to show how these guys use the opportunity of the pandemic to cash in, and how they are using it to corner key industries that are dominating every aspect of our lives.
Well, let's start with Bill Gates, for instance. I've watched the documentary on him. I've read a little bit about him. I had the impression that he was looking for ways to do good. Now, he's certainly very, let's use a kind word like self-assured, or has a lot of confidence in his point of view. Is he perhaps just misguided and then unwilling to take any input or reconsider the road he's on?
Yeah, so we followed Bill Gates all the way back, read all the memoirs and biographies, his father's memoirs, watched the documentaries, and you notice something. I mean, before really 1995, Bill Gates was not this philanthropist do-gooder. No, he was a ruthless capitalist who would use any tactic to get ahead. He admitted cribbing various features from both Apple and Xerox to build the Microsoft operating system. That got him into trouble with the Justice Department in the mid to late 90s, settling in 2001 this big antitrust suit. That was when he set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It was a tactic that's been used in the past by wealthy industrialists, the Rockefellers, when Standard Oil became a trust and everybody thought that the Rockefellers were ruthless capitalists. That's when the Rockefeller Foundation sets up. And then all of a sudden, almost overnight, they turn into the saviors of mankind. So Bill Gates, as far as philanthropy, he was never charitable. His mother would plead with him, please give some of your billions of dollars away. I mean, he's been the world's richest man 20 of the last 30 years. She would plead with him right to her deathbed in the mid 90s, please give your money away. He wouldn't. He kept it until it served to benefit him. Now, once he set up the foundation, and it was really a lot of the dreams of his father, regarding overpopulation and childhood vaccinations. I mean, Bill Gates Jr., he's the third, but he, junior for all intents and purposes, was not really concerned with global health. He was concerned with tech. His father was the one who was very concerned with global health, and he chaired the foundation. He was the, general counsel and legal advisor to younger Bill Gates. But yeah, I mean, that the idea that he did, he kind of rebranded, and then he became this hero of the left. But before that, he was really a villain.
So what do you imagine is going on? And I would like to sort of talk about the human part of this and the sort of root cause. What do you imagine is going on in his head? Is he really just, is it a kind of a narcissism where he has to continue to impact the world in ways that he feels good about? Or is it possibly the effects of aging and maturity, and he's actually had a change? I mean, you read some of the stories about the fights he had with his father when he was a child and some of his behavior. He really, not what you call a good dude in those years, but has sort of taken on the mantle of I'm doing good. Is there, as you look at all these guys, I'm just wondering if there's some sort of theme here. I mean, whether you look at the Rockefellers or Schwab or whomever, is it just part of a grandiose personality that it was at one time ruthless, as now is sort of trying to make an amends in some way that is equally as narcissistic? I'm struggling with this. Help me.
Sure. I mean, and you saw the documentary. I mean, his sister said that he had a nasty streak, and plenty of Microsoft employees have attested to the fact that he's a pretty hard guy to work for. So the cardigan clad, smiling man on TV, very Mr. Rogers-esque, is not the real Bill Gates as far as, his family and employees have said. But regarding the philanthropy and sort of what motivates people like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, who all give considerable sums to philanthropic causes, mostly their own, it's this God complex on steroids. And there's an MIT computer science professor named Joseph Wiesenbaum who sort of psychoanalyzed what drives a lot of these Silicon Valley guys. It's that they build these worlds, these software worlds, digital worlds of whether it's Facebook or Microsoft, and they're the gods of their worlds, where they can turn the dials and pull the levers, and everything responds how it should to them. And then the problem is they try to take that ability and execute it in the real world and turn our levers and our dials and hope that we'll respond how they want us to. It doesn't often go well because people don't like to be controlled. Nonetheless, Bill Gates doesn't want you to eat meat, for example. And it does just so happen that he owns all of the patented meat alternative companies, or invests heavily in them, that are supposed to replace meat. People don't exactly love fake meat. They prefer real meat in the case of people who like meat, but it's the same thing with energy. I mean, so we talk about in the book, the food, the energy, it's you can't drive gas vehicles. And so, while you think that the charity, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a lot of these other big philanthropic organizations, like they purport to do well, they're planning to save the world. It's a very ambitious goal. But at the same time, they end up putting out the white papers and the data that proves the case that their investments ought to be more profitable. It proves that cows are going to hurt the planet, therefore we should ban them. And countries around the world are actually taking a lot of this stuff seriously. I mean, Ireland is planning to slaughter anywhere from 40,000 to 200,000 cattle. And this all kind of starts as just kind of a idea from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation white paper, and Bill Gates writes about it on his blog 10 years ago about how cows are this big problem, and now all of a sudden countries around the world are planning to ban them. So this is kind of that God complex where they think that they can make a better product, a better just with the mRNA vaccines. I mean, the ultimate end goal with these mRNA technologies, which are miraculous, is according to Elon Musk, life extension. And Elon Musk said, in sort of tongue in cheek, you could turn yourself into a butterfly with the right mRNA sequence. I mean, it's obviously not the case, but he says the anti-aging benefits. Yeah. So they're working on anti-aging, and they're working on better meats that they grow in petri dishes. Right. And so that's kind of what animates these guys. I mean, because they can do it. They have the money and the power to do so.
It's sort of, I mean, again, it's which comes first. They invest in these companies that they think are doing good, that are going to replace the things that are doing bad, and they're providing the money, and then they get profits from it. They may not have been looking for the profit in the first place, but it does look rather suspicious. But the bigger issue for me is, and this is the thing that I'm seeing, that COVID was such a writ large example of, these people are hubristic. And it's interesting to me when I look at the cover of your book, it's mostly Americans, sufficiently hubristic to tell you how you should live your life. That is anathema to every principle upon which the American system was founded, it seems to me. Did you notice that difference? And do they ever notice that issue and sort of speak to it?
They don't speak to it. I mean, that Bill Gates is quoted as saying he, as a child, he was at war with his parents for control. He's always been, and when, in high school, when he was kicked out of the Lakeside High School Programmers Club by Paul Allen and the others who founded this very early software club, he kind of threatened them and said, you better let me back in, but be careful. If you give me control, I'll never let it go. And sure enough, I mean, he had Microsoft through the end there. And as far as like which comes first, the good ambitions of a fake meat company or the profits, we uncovered this strategy that Microsoft used in the 90s that got it into trouble with the antitrust regulators, and that was called embrace, extend, extinguish. That was Microsoft's term for it, where they would enter an industry and act like they're not making any waves, and we're just creating our own internet browser, nothing to see here. Eventually, they would extend their reach within that industry, installing Internet Explorer on every PC, and then ultimately in the extinguish phase, they would quote, cut off the air supply, Microsoft executives' term, to the competitor Netscape. And so that was a huge problem. Well, that embrace, extend, extinguish strategy seems to be playing out. I mean, with the food control situation where he just starts buying up some land and says, oh, nothing, I'm just kind of diversifying my assets. Buys up some of these alternative protein companies. I mean, very early angel investor in Beyond Meats, Impossible Foods, the fertilizer companies as well, these synthetic fertilizer companies, kind of joint ventures with Bayer, Monsanto. And it's really all about the patents and the intellectual property. It's not so much about saving the planet. It's that these new technologies, the fertilizers, the fake meats, and the new technologies for agriculture, they're all patented. And the family-owned farms, they can't afford to comply with the regulations. So we're really seeing the extinguish phase right now. If you ask ask any farmer how hard it is to run their business for a profit, it's very hard.
I get it. And finally, before I bring Dr. Victory in here, the relationship with Epstein is kind of an interesting chapter here.
Sure. So that really kicks off around 2011. Bill Gates is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is teaming up with J.P. Morgan, one of the largest banks, of course, to set up this global health investment fund. And the chief of investment banking at J.P. Morgan is a guy named James E. Staley. Now, Staley basically managed the Epstein client relationship at J.P. Morgan. Epstein was a incredibly valuable client for the bank. He brought in new clients. And in fact, JP Morgan has recently admitted that more than $1 billion in Epstein bank transfers passed through their accounts, through their wires, more or less marked for, quote, human trafficking. That's what JP Morgan called it in this trial. Now, they settled for close to $350 million with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein for basically, I mean, they settled to not admit guilt, but the accusation was that they facilitated the Epstein network. What does this have to do with Bill Gates? Well, Bill Gates has teamed up with JP Morgan on this global health investment fund, and Epstein wants a piece of it. He actually wanted to profit from it. He wanted to be brought in. And so James Staley, Jess Staley, introduces Epstein to Bill Gates. Well, they hit it off famously. The New York Times says many times, we don't have a total number on the number of times that Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein hung out, but we know that they had some shared interests, particularly in the fields of overpopulation. I mean, Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein sort of differ on their solutions to overpopulation. Epstein did not agree that saving many lives in the third world through the efforts like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's efforts would help with overpopulation. You can kind of actually see it seems counterintuitive that saving lives will help fix overpopulation. And that's a huge concern of Bill Gates. I mean, he's very open about it in his TED Talks, and the Earth is heading for 9 billion people, and we need to reduce that by 10 to 15%. But they shared that concern about overpopulation. They also shared concerns or shared interests in sort of genetic tinkering in CRISPR projects. And so that's kind of what they hit it off over, is this global health investment fund. Now that global health investment fund continued long after Jeffrey Epstein's demise, and was actually instrumental through the pandemic and helping find vaccines, et cetera. But yeah, we kind of dug deep into the relationship, and I think the most shocking thing about the whole thing is the JP Morgan bank transfers. I mean, if people are looking for an Epstein client list, JP Morgan surely has it.
Wow. Stunning. And it's weird that no one has brought that up, but here we are. Well, we're going to take a little break here, and then I'm going to bring Dr. Kelly Victory in. I want to hear more about some of the guys on the cover of your book here. Is Soros on the cover of your book? I wouldn't recognize him necessarily. Is he there?
Yeah, yes, he's over there on the right.
He seems like a bit of a different bird to me compared to the rest. So we'll get into that, and we'll bring Dr. Kelly Victory in here just after this. If you're trying to figure out the right present for someone, you will not go wrong with gifting the most comfortable sheets, clothing, and accessories that your friends and family have ever felt. Of course, I'm talking about Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth has the softest and most comfortable sheets, blankets, towels, PJs, joggers, and more, guaranteed. Susan and I love them. In fact, we still have Cozy Earth sheets on our bed. I slept in them last night. I was thinking of how great they were. And look at this. I'm wearing one of their super comfortable t-shirts right now. I just can't get enough of Cozy Earth. Their sheets are durable, machine washable, and come with a 10-year warranty against defects. So no surprise that Cozy Earth's brand has been featured on Oprah's Favorite Things for 5 years in a row. Whether it's their luxury pajamas, super soft bedding, loungewear, or plush bath towels, you will love shopping and gift giving at Cozy Earth. Here's my gift to you this holiday season. Go to CozyEarth.com, enter code DREW to save 40%. That's CozyEarth.com with code DREW. CozyEarth.com, code DREW, save 40%. Susan and I have been looking for a nutrition-packed, great-tasting greens drink for a while. And then we tried our friends at Paleo Valley's Organic Super Greens, which is superior to what's out there on the market. Our friends at Paleo Valley, well, they think of everything, and they've created what's been called a magical green powerhouse. All three delicious varieties, pure unflavored, strawberry lemonade, and tropical, contain 23 certified organic, antioxidant-rich superfoods, including the highest quality spirulina. It's also free of cereal grasses, gluten, grains, soy, and dairy, and no added sugars or artificial sweeteners. And what's more, it delivers digestive enzymes, polyphenols, which are believed to burn fat, and 8 essential amino acids. Imagine the time, effort, and cost of trying to make this yourself. It's impossible. Head on over to drdrew.com/paleovalley, and you will get 15% off your first order. All the great products they have there, 15% off at drdrew.com/paleo, Paleo. Thanksgiving is almost here, which means it's time for the best Genucel sale of the year. Just in time for the holidays, save over 60% off both of our personally tailored Genucel skincare packages at Genucel.com/Drew, so you can look your very best at all of your Thanksgiving gatherings. Look 10, 15, 20 years younger, guaranteed, with the best natural skincare anywhere. Take advantage of Genucel's best sale of the year and say goodbye to fine lines, crow's feet, puffiness, and dark spots. The Genucel experience is like no other, but don't take my word for it. You will look and feel your absolute best or your money back, no questions asked. So for results in 12 hours or less, Genucel's immediate effects is included for free. Plus, if you go to Genucel.com/Drew now, you'll get a free upgrade to priority shipping. That is Genucel.com/Drew, Genucel.com/Drew. Some platforms have banned the discussion of controversial topics. If this episode ends here, the rest of the show is available at drdrew.tv.
There's nothing in medicine that doesn't boil down to a risk-benefit calculation. It is the mandate of public health to consider the impact of any particular mitigation scheme on the entire population. This is uncharted territory, Drew.
This, yet again, is uncharted territory, Kelly. I welcome you to the program and introduce you to Seamus Bruner.
Hi, Seamus, really happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us. You and Drew covered a lot of real estate in that first segment, so I want to dial it back for a minute. Drew and I commonly disagree about things, although he's come far more to my side of the fence with regard to the pandemic debacle over the last couple of years. I pride myself on that. But let me set the record straight with regard to Bill Gates. Bill Gates was never altruistic. He is a narcissistic psychopath with a control fetish. And I say that as somebody who was a psychologist before I was a trauma expert. So before I became a physician. So as a psychologist, I can tell you, he is a card-carrying psychopath, truly, or sociopath is actually probably a better word, because he has no remorse at all for the ill that he does. And then I will also say, with regard to philanthropy, for all of them, I don't care if it's George Soros or Bill Gates or Zuckerberg or any of them. By the way, I love your word, control oligarch. Fabulous word. It's my new favorite word of the year. But when it comes to philanthropy, I can say, as somebody who grew up in a Catholic Jesuit household, it's only philanthropy really if it hurts, if it's painful, if it causes you something. For me to make a $5,000 donation to something, that's painful for me. It's a significant amount of my disposable income. For Klaus Schwab or Bill Gates or those to contribute, to gift, if you will, the amount of money they have, there's a sofa change to them, okay? They are only parting with as much money as it does not cause them even a blink of the eye. So I have no respect on that regard for any of them. What I want to pick your brain about for a minute here to start with, Seamus, is I look at the cover of your book, and we've got George Soros, who I think is 93, Klaus Schwab, I think is 85, Bill Gates is somewhere around 68, Zuckerberg, I think is 39. You're talking about, decades expanse of people who made it to the cover of the book. Talk about, how does this group, what is it? Is it just money that binds them? What is it that made this group the control oligarchs?
That's such a great question. It is, of course, their desire to control your life, many aspects of it, and they all are to varying degrees, control freaks like that, but they're not all the same. I mean, Jeff Bezos is certainly more, or at least historically was on the more libertarian side, and so was Mark Zuckerberg. But then you can kind of see as time progresses and, they get involved with these elite global institutions like the World Economic Forum, that they sort of bend to that angle and get an elite worldview, and the peasants do need to be controlled. I traced it all the way back. And it's probably best to start with the Club of Rome and the World Economic Forum. They were founded as more or less sister organizations, and they were founded to promote this work called the limits to growth. And the limits to growth has since been roundly debunked. It was faulty computer modeling, like the famous hockey stick graph. And the limits to growth basically held that if we don't stop producing offspring at to this rate we are, the planet's going to run out of resources. And now out of that popped up, the spaceship metaphor or thought exercise, and the life raft thought exercise. And which person would you off? Would it be the grandmother in the life raft, or would it be the young pregnant woman? All of that came from these people who, with the limits to growth, it was kind of this first idea that there's a global problem that requires global cooperation, and it's too big for any one country to solve on its own. And it really happened after World War II. I mean, this is kind of ancient history now, but it was the idea that the Club of Rome put out, that the enemy of humanity is humanity itself. We, the global elite, need a common enemy to unite against. I mean, this is more or less their exact words. We need a global enemy to unite against, and that enemy is humanity itself. And so they are anti-human, most of them. They do believe that, overpopulation kind of became a toxic brand. It's like, what do you do about overpopulation? There's not really a clear solution other than massive amounts of abortion and, lowering the birth rate below 2, which in a lot of countries, I think they should take a victory lap. A lot of countries, the birth rate is below 2, which is below the level of sustaining the population. But moving forward, they got kind of settle on, and this is the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, they settle on global cooling, then they settle on global warming. Eventually, they arrive at climate change, which is sort of perfect because the climate is always changing, and every weather event can be climate change. Reuters recently reported that a lightning strike was climate change, and next volcanoes will be climate change. So climate change is perfect in the sense that the world needs to come together. The population needs to cough up a ton of money, over $1 trillion, collectively in the Western countries, to solve the problem of climate change. Now, the problem with it is people kind of have shrugged collectively about climate change. Tragically, I don't really I don't take a position on whether the Earth is getting warmer or anthropogenic or what have you. But just that the elite interests seem to get very wealthy by trying to solve these global problems. And then comes the pandemic, and so the pandemic was again this ultimate opportunity, as Klaus Schwab said in his Great Reset address. It's the ultimate opportunity to reorder the world, to essentially abolish free market capitalism. They ultimately want to get to a system of no private property ownership. They say very openly and sort of famously, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. And they all subscribe to that.
Because, I'm clearly swimming in your pond, not mine. But as I look at this, it seems to me that the common theme is control, and that money is just table stakes. That it's not that these people all came together because they're wealthy. They all come together because they have a perverse and psychopathic desire to have control over others in a way that is not normal. And It's only the fact that they
Well,
happen to
Kelly,
be wealthy that has allowed them to get there, that other people who
yeah,
have that desire, and they probably are out there, don't have the kind of money that allows them to play in this elite group. Am I wrong on that?
it's actually, but before you answer, Seamus, I got to jump in and just
Sure.
say, Kelly, as a psychologist, I wonder if you could dig a little into that. Before Seamus answers, yourself dig into that, because it actually is confusing to me, and for me, confusion is one of my defense strategies. I know that right behind confusion is rage or disbelief or something like that. But I literally look at these guys and go, why would control be telling another person how they should live their life? Not only is it anathema to the principles that I thought this country was founded on, it feels alien to every shred of my being. So just if you wouldn't mind, yeah, just what kind of person, you said psychopath and sociopath and whatnot, and in my world, they use control just to get what they want. But it feels like this is a kind of a whole spectrum of people that like control for a variety of reasons. So I want you to speak to it before Seamus does.
It is the pathology of wanting control. And I would say that although people, I think, incorrectly use the word God complex about people like Bill Gates, he doesn't have a God complex. He is God's competitor. He is Satan. He is the Antichrist. He doesn't think he's God. He thinks he's better than God. He's above God. These people are godless. They are, to a person, atheist. Every one of them. They think that they supersede the will of God. And if God controls humanity and they supersede God, then they control humanity. If you want to look truly, I think
psychologically, what do they get out of that? It feels sort of disgusting.
Well, disgusting to you, but how incredibly empowering. If you believe that you are above all, that is an incredibly empowering. It is narcissism on steroids, if you will.
Right.
It's taking narcissism to the level where it is absolutely, deadly. There's nothing that they would stop at. And the only thing I think of that from a fictional depiction got close to that would be something like The Hunger Games, that movie, that concept, where you have a group of people who, for their own amusement, it really is only because they love the fact that they feel so incredibly superior to you. You will eat bugs, you will wear nothing, you will have nothing, and you will be happy with whatever crumbs we throw to the peasants. It is on steroids. Is narcissism on steroids in my estimation. Yeah. But I want to hear, Seamus, do you think that am I off base when I say that control is the theme and money is the table stakes?
No, I mean, at this point, they're going to live the billionaire lifestyle forever. I mean, even if they give away half or 80 to 90% of their incomes, right, they will be living, several of them own private islands, and they all have private jets, or Jeff Bezos has a 450-foot yacht, which is, and I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm all for people making money. We're capitalists at the Government Accountability Institute. But it is that control through line that connects a lot of these guys. And for Dr. Drew, I would encourage you to look at the epigraph quotes at the top of the chapter. I mean, in the Soros chapter, there's a great quote, and it took a lot of time to verify some of these quotes because you kind of hear them and you see them on memes, and you're like, is this a real quote? This couldn't be a real quote. Sure enough, George Soros has a quote that he talks about. He has powerful messianic fantasies. He fancies himself a god. He straight up admits it. The LA Times quoted him on it. Yeah, right. Yeah. Read the chapter 6 epigraph quote from George Soros, and then everybody's heard from Henry Kissinger, who is Klaus Schwab's mentor. Power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. And then in terms of whether or not they love the values of America, I mean, they certainly you think that they would be a little more grateful for the values of America that turned them into such fabulously wealthy individuals. But David Rockefeller, I mean, chapter 1, who is really the control oligarch prototype. He's got a great quote. I mean, I changed the word cabal to club because certain people didn't want it to sound too conspiratorial. But in his memoirs, published 2002, David Rockefeller more or less says, some people believe that my family and I are part of some secret cabal working against the interests of the United States, trying to overthrow the United States for a one world one world type situation. If that's the charge, I mean, this is verbatim. If that's the charge, I am guilty of it and I am proud of it. And so I mean, really what this is, yeah, I mean, read those quotes. I mean, there are some really, really sinister quotes and they're all documented. I mean, over 1,032 endnotes that's a couple thousand sources in the book, all of them you'd trust. But that's really what unites them is that they want to transfer power and control from the people, from individual countries to globalist institutions like the World Economic Forum. The UN is really a subset. I mean, the politicians act after the think tanks and NGOs devise the game plans. You saw that in the pandemic. I mean, the NGOs had been working on lockstep. I mean, in the case of the Rockefeller Foundation, had a perfect plan for when a pandemic eventually were to arise. I don't allege that it was an intentional release or anything like that, but they were certainly planning for a pandemic. It's very obvious, and they were well positioned to profit from a pandemic. And so the Rockefeller Foundation had the lockstep exercise. And what you notice in the Event 201 exercise, just weeks before COVID pandemic began, what you notice is like the whole response to the pandemic is about control. You must control the information. I mean, they perfectly predicted that there would be misinformation spreading like wildfire, and it's very critical to have just one central voice of authority. That would be Dr. Fauci, which Bill Gates has been funding him for 20 plus years, or funding NIH programs to the tune of $3+ billion. So, I mean, Dr. Fauci kind of goes to Xanadu 2.0 in Seattle in the late 90s when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is really getting set up. And that's when Bill Gates promises to shower Fauci's pet priorities with Gates Foundation cash. And from then on, Fauci is under Bill Gates in a way, in that sense. So, they want to transfer the power from nations to global organizations that are unelected and therefore unaccountable. Nobody's elected Klaus Schwab or George Soros or Bill Gates. I mean, nobody elected him. And when they're unelected, they're unaccountable, which is awfully convenient for them.
Well, Bill Gates was just recently lauding the response of the Chinese Communist Party to the pandemic and their remarkable ability to, quote, control the virus. And he goes on to say, yes, maybe a lot of individual liberties and individual rights were tread upon, but look what a remarkable impact it had. Reed, here's the bottom line. Reed, that's what it takes to actually manage a public health crisis, is treading on and removing and essentially disregarding people's civil liberties. So if you have any question about whether or not he supports the values of the United States, it's clearly no, because he would absolutely get rid of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution if there's any public health crisis that they have determined as a public health crisis, which is part of the reason this WHO treaty or these amendments to the WHO with regard to the pandemic are so scary. Again, Seamus, we're talking about completely unelected individuals at the WHO. That is the long arm of the Chinese Communist Party. They clearly duck march to whatever the WEF says, and they're all in cahoots together. So I guess the next question for you, from my perspective, is, what is going to happen next? You clearly have done the deep dive on these as people, as individuals, and certainly their connections to one another. Where is this going? We know they're going to have another pandemic. They've got something else planned. Pandemics, by the way, are so, I'm a mass casualty specialist. It's hard to get people really fearful over something like climate change. It's just too slow. It's just too, it's hard to get people really jazzed up even about gun violence. A dozen people here, a dozen people there. But a pandemic's awesome because that strikes fear into the masses. So it's such a great way to get control. What from your purview do you think is going to happen next? What's next on the hit parade?
Well, I'll just tell you what they tell us is going to happen next. I mean, there's this World Economic Forum visionary, Yuval Noah Harari. He's the author of *Sapiens*. He's lauded, his 30 million copies of his books have been sold worldwide. He's kind of this brilliant thinker. President Obama praised him. Mark Zuckerberg loves his work. Bill Gates loves his work. And he hedges his statements where he's saying, I'm not saying this is good or bad, but you can tell that he's sort of excited. I mean, so I'll give you an example of one of his quotes. He says, COVID, and exactly to your point, Kelly, right? Sorry.
Yes.
Exactly to your point, he says that COVID was critical because COVID was what allowed people to accept total biometric surveillance. That's more or less a verbatim quote. And he says, the tracking and the tracing and the contact tracing and the jabbing and the swabbing, that got people to accept not just what's going on above your skin, what's going on under your skin. And so he talks about microchips and all this stuff. I'm not saying that you're going to get microchipped. I don't say anything like that in the book, but they're working on patents like that. The other things they're working on, digital ID. Just earlier this month, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with the United Nations hosted an event called Digital ID 50 in 50 event in 5 event, which is 50 countries within 5 years will be rolling out digital ID regimes. And it's kind of sold as, oh, well, this will be super convenient for you. But it's I don't really have a problem pulling out my driver's license. I'm not sure why there needs to be a centralized database that kind of tracks all of the things that you're doing. And we saw, and I thought going into this, you hear all these conspiracy theories, it's in, what's real, what's not. That was the point of this book, is to separate the facts from the fiction. Everybody remembers during the pandemic what a ID looks like, a vaccine passport. In New York City, you couldn't go into restaurants, you couldn't socialize, you couldn't go to events without one. It's the same thing. And so really the end game is a system much like China. They all praise China, as you mentioned. Klaus Schwab praises China's COVID response. They use euphemism terms like efficiency or their ability to mobilize. But ultimately, they love this system of state-run capitalism. Klaus Schwab calls it stakeholder capitalism. He said that the COVID opportunity was an opportunity to implement stakeholder capitalism, which is this sort of hybrid of communism and capitalism with digital IDs, and they're pushing central bank digital currencies. The IMF just announced earlier this month that they're working very hard to push CBDCs. The Atlantic Council, I mean, these are big, serious organizations. It's not me saying this. This is what they're saying. The Atlantic Council says the momentum behind CBDCs heading into 2024 remains strong. CBDCs, I mean, there's many critics of CBDCs, people much savvier than I in finance terms. I mean, the head of one of the Federal Reserve branches says there is absolutely no reason that we need a central bank digital currency unless you want to be like China or like the Trudeau government with the Canadian truckers and freezing people's accounts if they're dissidents. It's just total unprecedented control. And then, I mean, finally, I'll just say this AI thing. I mean, you always thought about artificial intelligence and robots as this faraway sci-fi kind of future, and we'll know it when we get there. We're there. I mean, it's happening right now, all around you. It's going to lead to, according to Sam Altman, which no one would know AI better than he would. He's the OpenAI on again, off again CEO, creator of ChatGPT. He says anybody who thinks this isn't going to lead to like wide scale job losses is sorely mistaken. There will be lots of job losses, which is then going to be used to usher in a UBI, universal basic income. That's how you'll kind of live your existence, is on a meager universal basic income. You'll be in these high-rise 15-minute cities or whatever, eating the alternative protein paste.
Is there sounds delightful. Is there a kingpin to this cabal? As I said, Soros is 93, and Schwab is in his mid 80s. They unfortunately have an expiration date, one hopes. When that happens, is there a succession plan in place, or does there need to be? Is this thing now self-sustaining from your perspective?
It appears self-sustaining. I mean, George Soros, there was some question over whether, and he would certainly be sort of a kingpin, but there, and David Rockefeller was certainly a kingpin, but he's moved on. There was some question whether George Soros would actually make it. I mean, you're right, he is 93. And so we were like, well, should we even put him on the cover of the book? He's kind of a dead horse. And so that really led me to dig into the entire Soros family and all 5 of his children. And it turns out his youngest son, Alexander Soros, the youngest of 5 children, each of them very radical and funding, the prosecutor, the soft on crime prosecutors and the open border migration policies type stuff. Alexander Soros, who is now just taking control of the $25 billion dark money network of the Open Society Institutes, he's more radical than his father, and he said so. And he's, going to be funding a lot of radical left policies, the open borders and the election, whatever euphemism they
Seamus,
use, security.
What does he think? What does he think he's doing? What's his? I'm trying to figure out what his goal is, and does he not get any feedback from the data in the cities where he's creating all this mess?
Well, so if you really look at what's driven George Soros Sr., and so he's obviously the mentor and the largest influence in Alex's life. What drives George Soros Sr. is this concept of an open society, and it sounds charming and lovely, really. But really what an open society is no borders. It's a worldwide, no borders, no national, sovereignty. I mean, George Soros did grow up in Nazi Germany. So he's got some seriously nationalist feelings. I mean, Soros is an Esperanto term, which is, the language that is supposed to replace all languages. And so, he really does not like borders or countries, and the United States is probably the biggest threat. Not anarchists, no. They're a global technocratic elite, much kind of like a Brussels type situation or like Davos. Democracy, which a lot of his initiatives are named like the Democracy Initiative or the Democracy Fund. They're always sort of misnomers or inversions of what they really are about. They don't love democracy. Democracy is slow. This is why they praise China for things like the pandemic, but not just the pandemic, for other reasons. It's efficient to not be accountable to the people. And so a global technocratic elite. I mean, 10 years ago, if you asked me about the New World Order or this kind of stuff, I would say, oh, that's kind of kooky town. But the pandemic was really, I think, eye-opening for me and a lot of people that this is what's going on. They really do resent nations that resist the global organizations, and the United States is like enemy number one of globalists.
Well, it became very clear during the pandemic that Americans in particular are very susceptible to the sort of boiling a frog concept. Anything that's insidious and slow, they just don't get it. No matter how many times you try to bring it to their attention, you're called a conspiracy theorist or a tinfoil hat wearer. And then when it happens, it's like, wow, who knew? So I guess from my next question really to you would be, Seamus, what do we do about it? Is it too late? Are we saying, I'm happy. I have no children, and I'm of an age that I hopefully won't live long enough to live in a 15-minute city eating bugs. But what do we do about it? How do you unwind this?
Well, I've got a lot of hope for the future. I don't think it's too late. I don't think it's over. I don't think they've won just yet. I mean, we're close. 2030 is what they set as their endpoint of basically total control. Agenda 2030 is like, we're going to, when they say we're going to have, totally clean power, and we're going to cure poverty, and we're going to solve, education and all they list on these goals of the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals, like every aspect of society. 2030 is the endpoint of which they hope to achieve it. I think just to be safe, we should say 2025. So we've got a few years, but you can see, the energy industry is getting controlled with the bans on gas-powered vehicles in favor of electric vehicles, which Congress just passed a kill switch requirement that every auto manufacturer has to be able to put a kill switch in a vehicle so that it can be remotely turned off for safety, I guess. But these things are all coming down the pike. The number one thing you can do is be well armed with the facts and know what's going on and share the facts, because you need to be able to articulate some of these things that are happening. I mean, it's not actually very hard to prove what's going on. There's every other day, as I'm going through this book launch, I'm like, wow, here's another story about digital ID or central bank digital currencies. I mean, and it's coming from mainstream outlets, so it's not really that fringe. The other thing I would say is that the solution to all of this globalism problems is local. All the solutions are at the local level, whether it's buying everything you can as much as you can local, from your food to supporting your local businesses, getting rid of Amazon if you can. I know it's hard. I mean, the book's on Amazon. I wish it weren't, or wish it would be purchased from your local retailer. But then also getting involved with local organizations. There's a lot of them, Moms for Liberty type organizations, and going and taking back school boards, and just educating your friends and your neighbors. And what we've seen before is when their agendas and their plans are exposed, they're forced to really recalibrate and recalculate. And, some of the things, they fall out of fashion. They know that they can't get away with it. I mean, you saw it with the vaccine mandates. I mean, a lot of other countries complied, but the United States, a good number of people didn't. And now you look at the booster compliance, and it's like, down near zero. So eventually people, wake up and don't succumb to the pressures of the control oligarchs, but that requires a lot of spreading of information and sharing the facts.
Yeah, because I have to say, while I want to be hopeful, I agree with you. I think if they're saying, 2030 to be safe, you have to say, maybe it's 2025, 26. You're talking about 2 years from now, and most Americans are going to be tied up or distracted by the upcoming election. That's what everyone's focusing on. So they're not focusing on the thing that they need to be focusing on, which is in fact what is about to happen to us. And I don't see people really pushing back yet. I'm hopeful that when they launch the next, Fear Fest, which is around the corner, I'm probably in the form of a pandemic again, is how people respond. That's going to be the real litmus test. Do people go back and put the masks back on? Do they comply with school closures? Do they comply with lockdowns and limited, capacity in bars and restaurants and all the stuff that, landed us with a smoldering, crater where our economy used to be? What our response to the next thing, I think, is going to be really the bellwether. So, if people comply, then we're done. You might as well just, spend it all right now, because it's going to be game over. Do you think there's anything people, from a political perspective, is there anything that would change, do you think, if we put, somebody else in the White House versus Biden? Do you think anything would change?
Well, we know that Biden's largest opponent is basically the enemy of all of these guys. So, I mean, that's just what it is. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg with his 400 million in the drop boxes, or George Soros with Alvin Bragg and Fannie Willis, and George Soros is bankrolling the effort, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, to remove Donald Trump from the ballot. So, I mean, I don't think we've ever seen a figure who's as reviled by these kind of globalist forces as Donald Trump. I'm skeptical that there will be that they'll let him in one way or another.
Right. Right.
So I guess we'll just have to see how that goes. But again, like organizing at the local level, taking back your children's education, taking an active role in children's education, taking an active role in your community. I'm in Florida, so I didn't live through the worst parts of the pandemic. Right. And I consider myself blessed. I don't take that for granted. But maybe you want to consider moving to a place that's less tyrannical, because it's we're not going to put up with it. I can
Seamus,
speak for Florida.
Seamus, to that,
we're not
to
going to put
that
up
point.
with it.
To that point, I feel like there's an interesting sort of headline, for lack of a better word, that there's something that is top of mind for people. Is they are tired of being disdained and disparaged by their government, by businesses, by regulators, by the media. It's what's creating the movement around the country. And people, I heard somebody say the other day, we shouldn't be supplementing people's income. We should be buying them luggage, so they can go places where they can more effectively make a living. But it's generally true that there's these parallel economies popping up. And so people are not just wanting not to do business with people and governments that disparage them. They're motivated to do business with these parallel organizations that like them, that want to serve them. Are you seeing things like that also as a solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is such a great point, Dr. Drew. The parallel economies, and that's what I mean when I say buying local. I mean, I don't mean go fund your local control oligarch lover. Find the people in your community who think like you and support their business, and find not just in your community, but I mean, sponsors of this show and sponsors of shows that you trust. I mean, those are typically people you can rely on as the good guys. And so, find those organizations and stop funding your opposition, stop funding the people who resent you and ridicule you, and put your money in another place. Vote with your wallet. I mean, it seems so small next to these trillion-dollar forces, but it, collectively makes a big difference. You saw it with Target and Bud Light, for example.
I'm watching the clock wind down here, and I want to spend a few minutes at least talking about everybody's favorite topic, which is Epstein. Go back to that. You guys touched on it, but I'd love to hear more about, Seamus, your theory, or maybe it's more than theory, about who Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were actually working for, if they were working for someone, what the relationship was, and how you think that whole thing really was organized.
You're trying to get me killed, Dr. Kelly. I'm joking.
No.
I'm joking.
He's suicided.
This wasn't an Epstein book, although I've thought about it. I mean, man, what a story. And the clients, I mean, they're out there. The names are known. We just don't know for sure if they're clients. I want to be clear, there's no evidence, and Bill Gates has certainly denied, any knowledge of or activity in, I guess, Epstein's subsequent schemes or illegal activities, raping children or what have you. But Bill Gates certainly knew when he became friends with Epstein that he had been charged and convicted of soliciting prostitution from a minor. That charge happened in 2006, conviction in 2008. And so we've got actually quotes. The New York Times tracked down some Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation people. They don't talk to me, but the New York Times they talked to, and they said that Epstein, when they first kind of brought Epstein into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation network, said, now, when you Google me, and this is more or less a direct quote, it's in the New York Times, like, when you Google me, you might find some things that would lead you to think that I'm not a good person. But I can assure you it was no worse than, quote, stealing a bagel. That's what he said. And so, I mean, that's just really sick. Obviously, everybody knows Jeffrey Epstein is a sick man. But the fact that Bill Gates proceeded to, and Gates Foundation staff were horrified. I mean, they were like, oh, this guy was soliciting prostitution from a minor. Why is Bill Gates hanging out with him and continuing to hang out with him and fly on his jet? I mean, Bill Gates was on the jet. But I want to go, back to the flight logs. That doesn't prove anything. And people talk about like an Epstein client list, like he was just kind of jotting down all of his clients. He may have done that, but there's really no evidence that there's like something called the client list. What I can tell you is that when JP Morgan admits to the Treasury Department in court and under oath type situations that they facilitated $1 billion in transactions and, quote, human trafficking transactions, that $1 billion, that is a ton of money. And there's always got to be a person on the other end of the transaction, right? I mean, we don't know if it's a 1 billion all into Epstein's account, or 500 million in or 500 million out. But there are people on the other end of those wire transfers. Treasury Department presumably has them. JP Morgan definitely has them. And that's the client list right there. I mean, what else would people be sending Jeffrey Epstein $1 billion for? Regarding like who he works for or what, I don't know. I don't have facts on that. I do know that he has like the cameras, and it absolutely appeared to be a blackmail operation based on the FBI's documents. Like what else would you have cameras in like bedroom for when you're running a underage prostitution ring? And so, and these kind of things have, intelligence agencies, it would seem, right? There's been scandals like this in the past, involving high level. I mean, I think there was just a bust of it wasn't underage, but a big prostitution ring in DC that had high level military clientele and potentially even lawmakers. And there's been many myriad prostitution and even underage prostitution scandals. Tragically, I mean, I think it's one of the most tragic scandals that there could be, is the harming of children like that. And so it's tragic. And JP Morgan has the clients. We should know who those are, and they need to be prosecuted. I mean, that's the thing, is like, you can't traffic humans to no one. So there are people on the receiving end, and they need to be brought to justice.
Right. So we have this list of people, and we know, and I agree with you, it certainly appears to have been a blackmail scheme. And I think it's implausible to believe that Jeffrey Epstein himself was trying to blackmail these high-level people. To what end? So whether or not it was on the behalf of the U.S. government, there are people out there saying that it was actually the Mossad, and that this was part of an Israeli way to try to be able to control and blackmail high-level individuals within the U.S. I don't know. I don't have any intel on that, but somebody does. And you can't, it's just not, it's just not conceivable to me that somebody doesn't know who is behind this, who is funding this, who orchestrated the whole thing. So I just was wondering if you had intel on that piece of it or not, or if that will be your next book, the Epstein story, or are you going to continue hammering on the control oligarchs?
Well, if it is, I didn't hang myself. It's I think the biggest story ever, the biggest corruption scandal story. I mean, I think we kind of know that our government must be in on it, right? I mean, how not or at the very least our government is compromised, or the prosecutors are compromised. I mean, it is so bizarre. I mean, just like, you go back and read like the night of his murder, or alleged murder, in the jail cell. I mean, like 100 things had to go wrong in order for for no one to see who offed him. So, I mean, I guess the criminal justice system is implicated. And then there were previous cases going back 20 plus years where he was let off the hook. And JP Morgan, I mean, just paid JP Morgan's like the largest bank in the United States. One of them just paid a $350 million settlement to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. You don't pay that much money if you didn't do anything. And James Staley, I mean, for heaven's sake, you go read about James Staley. I won't ruin your listeners' day. But the allegations, Disney characters. There's transcripts of the phone calls with Epstein and using Disney character names. So it's like seriously sick stuff. And he hasn't been. He denies. Of course, I got to say, James Staley denies that he did anything wrong. But if you read the reports, it's like, I mean, how is this guy not investigated at the very least?
Right. Crazy stuff.
You've been very kind with your time. I know we're all running up against the clock here. I look forward to reading the book. I feel, so much of the last couple of years have been about scales falling from my eyes. There it is, control oligarchs. And I just shake my head when I see what some of these guys are up to, and I just don't get it. By the way, while we were streaming, Charlie Munger passed away. There's one of the good guys we've lost, humbly, I would say. And I think I don't know anymore. maybe Seamus will get his claws into him too. I don't know. But
no, Charlie,
wonder if either of you have last. Okay. Seamus, last words.
Well, just thank you so much for all you've done. I mean, yes, scales falling from everyone's eyes, I think, it's been a big wake-up call. The pandemic was a big wake-up call that they can do tyrannical things, even to you, even to your family, in your own home. And just read the book. I mean, it's like every sector. I mean, it's got the smart thermostats, and people are getting locked out in Denver from their smart thermostats and waking up drenched in sweat, unable to control their own temperature in their home. I mean, there's some seriously nefarious things happening, and we need to get the word out like pronto.
Right. Well, thank you again.
We'll do it. Hopefully this is the beginning of it. Thank you. And we will let you go, Seamus. Thank you so much. You can follow him at SeamusBruner.com, B-R-U-N-E-R. Seamus is S-E-A-M-U-S. Twitter, same, Seamus Bruner, and Instagram. And then Kelly, it's interesting. I'm reading Elon Musk's book, his biography by Isaacson, and he's a very different character than these guys. I look forward to reading The Control Oligarch, because Musk has no interest in control, and yet he's a very controlling businessman. He controls his empires and things, extremely controlling and demanding, but not interested in telling people how to live their life. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Which is a different thing.
Very different. There are lots of people who are, we use the vernacular, control freaks or very control, but these people have a pathologic desire to supersede all other power and they get off on
So
it.
crazy.
There's actually, even a source, there's an element of sexual gratification. He said, it's the greatest aphrodisiac. Yes, there is actual gratification to the ability to actually control and be a higher power in the lives of people than God in their minds. So with that, I will leave. I've got to jump off. I've got another.
Yes, you got to go too. But, so Kelly, we'll see you soon. I will review the schedule coming up with the audience. We are going to be off Wednesday and Thursday. We have to travel right away here, but we're going to come back with Steve-O noontime on Friday. He's got some new stuff out, his bucket list. Tom Wren's in here on the 4th. He's got some updates. And then on Tuesday, next week, obviously, is a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, also scheduled a little bit different. Nicole Angemi, check out her Instagram, is Mrs._Angemi, I think is how she has her Instagram. It's she's a medical educator. And then on the 6th with Kelly back in on Wednesday, Ed Dowd, and that is, I believe, a 3 p.m. show. Let me look at my schedule very quickly. I'm sorry, give me a second here so I can confirm time of day. Yeah, pretty much everything is 3 o'clock next week, but Steve-O is noontime Pacific. So we thank you being here, but watch you guys out on the restream, and of course on the Rumble Rants as well. Caleb, did you have any comments or any reaction to what Seamus was talking about?
No, I always ask the question of, look, some of these guys are like, 92, 93 years old. How can they ever possibly expect to benefit from taking over the world at this point in life? Especially if they're, it seems like Soros is not religious at all. So where I don't understand.
Narcissism begs no alternative. Okay. When you are narcissistic, you can't contemplate that you're going to die. It's just not a thing. It just doesn't, isn't enter their ability to process things. And they have family members, as Seamus was telling us about. He has Alexander, who has stepped in, and I don't know if you saw some of his action yesterday. He was quoting crime rates in rural environments versus cities.
I saw that.
And going, why are you bothering me? It's like, it's just apples and oranges. Not even like, it's just a bizarre way to look at this. So it's clear that his cognitive dissonance is so profound, he's unwilling to take any feedback. So, it's upon all of us. We've got to become aware. We've got to, I didn't expect freedom, again, I've said this many times, to be such a big issue in my life, but here we are where we have to step up and raise awareness about these things. I'm certainly going to read the book about the controller group so I can try to understand them a little better.
That's what I try. I try to understand it as, because I feel like a lot of people, especially on the shows, it's the thing that people want to jump to is that they take them away from being human beings and just think of them as these are demonic presences, and they start using things like, well, he's an antichrist, or he is, but it's still a human being, and that's why if he is a sociopath, why does he care about a future for his son? That doesn't, so there's something odd there that I'm not clicking with. Of do they think they can live forever in some way through their riches, or there's something that their brain's just so warped that they don't know?
No, I mean, that's why I was asking the kinds of questions I was asking at the beginning. Like, what are they thinking? How would they describe what they're doing? And we need to hear more of that so we can balance against, some of the stuff that like Seamus is reporting. But I'm sure they have reasons for it. Just that they don't seem to, they're not very Bayesian in their reasoning. They don't update their priors. And that is how people get into ideologies, that how people do incredibly harmful things to other people. And back to your point about what do they think after they die? It's why people put their names on buildings and things like that. They kind of, they want things to go on in their absence, and
just seems like they're
very
lot of work.
narcissistic in the
like,
moment.
It's got to be some sort of a mental illness mixed in there, because I'm just thinking, gosh, if I'm getting to 93 and I'm still trying to take over the world when I'm already a billionaire and I can get anything that I wanted, I'm like, why don't you just sit down for a minute? Just sit down.
Right.
Just sit down and just stop.
It's the kind of person. I guess it's the kind of person that has that kind of success that will be the kind of person that wants to keep going like this.
There's nothing else to do.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's odd. It's odd, and I think we should try to understand it.
Like, why does Warren Buffett not have this compulsion to go and like mess things up like it seems like Soros and these others do?
That's right.
It doesn't. That's the part I guess it doesn't make sense yet.
And by the way, please study history. Everybody,
Yeah.
please study your history. There's so much goes wrong, so much evil, so much awful gets done to other humans in the name of doing good. It's all, it's always in the name of being good and doing what's right. What do you think Germany was all about? They were doing the right thing, but they were, they felt they were justified in everything they were doing. It's always in the name of good that horrible things are done. The greatest buttress against that is freedom and local governments, local relationships, family units. These things buttress against these large consolidations that can just run amok. So,
and there's a
good
a good point being made by someone in the comments that's saying that I am a non-psychopath trying to make sense of the actions of a psychopath, and it's always going to conflict in my brain whenever I try to make sense of that from a healthy brain.
It is. It is, but Kelly modified her assessment to sociopath a little bit.
Right.
Again, we can't make diagnosing on these people. I don't want to try. I mean, narcissism seems like a good bet. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. There's got to be some narcissistic stuff going on in there.
Maybe it'll never make sense to me.
Why this individual is so focused on telling other people how to live and not trusting. It's a distrust of all of us. And that's what we should be distrustful of. So let's leave it at that. Yeah. See you at noon on Friday. Thank you for being here, everybody. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help. All right, breast milk still flowing. 25-year-old female had a daughter 6 years ago, breastfed for around a year. Haven't had any pregnancy or miscarriages. I'm not on birth control. I'm healthy, 150 pounds. 3 years have gone by, and if I squeeze my breast, I still express white breast milk. It will shoot out pretty far. My husband does not squeeze or suck on them extensively, so I don't think that he's stimulating production. She's looked into all this. This is good. It's not really something that concerns me per se. I'm more curious why it hasn't stopped after 3 years. I figured the milk would eventually dry up. Your milk is dried up. It's just you're still producing a small amount. But I mean, that's just the way. It's not like she has a full production of milk. It's your taint is burning. The taint is burning.